I think press releases still do their job, and it's a good way to get the word to a lot of people at once.
Hi there, and welcome to Media Coffee, a podcast by PR Newswire, a Cision brand. I'm your host, Sami Saad, and in this episode, I'm thrilled that we're joined by Hannah Lutz from Automotive News. Hannah was the deputy editor at the time of our interview. Since then, she stepped into a new role as a director of technology and innovation coverage at that same publication. So, huge congrats to Hannah and best of luck in her new role. During our conversation, we talked about how her team approaches stories around electric vehicles, automation, and the evolving supply chain. Hannah also shared insights for PR professionals on what to consider when pitching to automotive or B2B media. We also covered how she evaluates press releases and why offering subject matter experts can make a real difference. So if you work in PR communications, especially in B2B, automotive, or tech, there's a lot in here for you. So let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us today, Hannah. How are you?
Hi, Sammy. Good. I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So let's start with your background in journalism. You started as a editorial intern, and now you're the deputy editor, which is quite impressive. What drew you first to the automotive industry?
So I studied journalism at Loyola University Chicago. So I graduated, moved back to the Detroit area, and really started networking in Detroit. My resume kind of went from one person to another, and ended up at Automotive News. So they offered me an internship, um, and that's really where I was able to cover all the different sides of the automotive industry. I was general assignment, so I covered store like the breaking news of the day. I covered automaker suppliers, dealers. I really got like a high level view of the auto industry. So that was great. And then I started covering full time as a full time reporter, finance and insurance and retail. So that's like car loans and dealerships. Then I became the finance editor. And anyway, I ended up covering a bunch of different parts of the industry, manufacturing, electric vehicles, technology. And that was my goal to really learn as much as I could about every part of the industry.
Thanks for sharing. And can you tell us a little bit about your current role right now and what specifically you cover?
Sure. So I am deputy editor of technology and innovation for Automotive News. So, our team covers electric vehicles, like I just mentioned. So that's like the whole EV ecosystem, batteries, charging, the actual vehicles. One of my colleagues really is focused on Tesla and Rivian and Lucid. We also cover technology. So that's software-defined vehicles. You might think of connected cars, um, artificial intelligence, automated driving, self-driving cars. Also, the supplier reporter is on our team, so he covers the whole supply chain, and suppliers are really innovative, so that's why he's on our team. It's really I feel like, in my opinion, we have really the most cutting edge, fast moving part of the industry under our team.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a very fast-moving industry. It's rapidly evolving. There's every day there's something new in the automotive industry. So, what should, PR professionals or communication professionals not pitch you? What are some topics that you're not interested in?
What are we not interested in? Well, I think when I get pitched, it's important that the PR person understands who our audience is and what we cover. So we are a business to business publication. Our audience is the auto industry. So when I get pitches about consumers, usually we'll pass. I mean, occasionally if it's something about like EV education, we might take it because there is so much to be done on EV education, and we think about it as educating the industry as well. But most of the consumer facing stories is just not for us. And even single company stories, I know that's sometimes hard to hear for PR firms, but um, we unless it's a really big company that has a very big following, people searching for them, like a General Motors or something like that. The single company stories we don't always take on. We'd rather look at it as like a trend piece. If there's three or more companies who are in a similar situation, we would approach it that way.
All right, that's very good to know. It's important to highlight this distinction that, automotive news is focusing more on B2B, topics. So where do you source your stories? Where do you come up with story ideas?
Well, one way is following the big national narratives, and we ask ourselves, how does this affect the auto industry or even one part of the auto industry like dealers? Because that's what our audience is. It's dealers, it's automakers, it's suppliers. So we want to focus on how pieces of the news affect them and their business. That's why they look to us as a resource for how to run their businesses. Um, Another way we come up with ideas is kind of really out of conversations. We are well networked. We have interviews all the time and maybe like informal chats with reliable sources all the time. And we ask ourselves what's surprising, or if we're going through a data set, what looks different here? What is not quite adding up? And then that leads us to an exploration that is usually a story.
What makes a great media pitch when you know, open your inbox and you're scanning through your emails? I'm sure you get a lot of pitches, a lot of press releases probably. What is like the thing that catches your attention when it comes to, media pitch?
I like when it's customized. Like I said, it's important to know what we cover and who our audience is. So, like general pitches or press releases, sometimes when I read them, it just doesn't apply to me or to us. Um, some common mistakes when I am interested in a pitch is not having the expert available. That is something that I run into kind of a lot actually, where they're offering this expert to talk about a really hot news topic, but the expert isn't available for like a week, and, and we're writing the story today. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into a pitch, I know, and those are some things that stick out to me.
That's a great point that you just highlighted that if you're going to offer an expert or a spokesperson that they would be available to comment on the story or so let's kind of move on to like common mistakes that PR professionals or communications professionals make when they reach out to you. Do you have anything that comes to mind?
I mean, that's a big one, just not having the expert available.
Mhm.
Um, and not really having a full understanding of what we cover. Trying to think of other, I mean, I don't really see anything as like a mistake. It's just another level of preparation or education. Um, I sometimes when I get pitched, they lay out what the expert can provide. And so I'll agree to the interview if it seems like something that applies to my beat. And then they'll ask me to send a full list of questions. And I'm happy to share topics that I want to discuss, but sometimes it's like, well, you suggested this call, so I don't have like a whole deep interview prepared to share with you, and I wouldn't share like specific questions anyway. But yeah, when there's like very frequent requests for my questions or my topics after it was suggested by that person, sometimes that's frustrating just because I have high level topics to discuss, but I really am thinking of it sort of as an introduction to how we can work together in the future. And sometimes, when we're chasing so much news, and at Automotive News, we have the news of the day, and then we still have a print paper that we run every week. It's really big. We have a lot in there. So it's like we're chasing the news of the day and all the stories that are going to go into that. So sometimes I honestly just don't have time to send everything over ahead.
When I was in working in PR, I used to hear this a lot that when you want to pitch a journalist, you want to make sure that you include all the information, all the assets in that one pitch. Kind of come up with the story yourself, and you're pitching a story to the journalist, and you want to make their job easier, not harder. So I totally agree with what you said, and I appreciate you mentioning it. Mentioning
Yeah, and even if
them.
you don't have to pitch a story, you can pitch a person, which is really helpful to us. Like this is my client and this person is an expert in X, Y, and Z, which I see that you're covering. I think he or she would be a great resource for you. Can I schedule an introduction? Like that's a great pitch. Just an introduction. It doesn't have to be tied to a specific story.
Right. Yeah, that's good to know. Let's move on to press releases. There's a few questions there I wanted to ask you. So first, what is your attitude towards press releases, and how do you like to receive them?
You mean like via email or
Yeah.
okay. I receive most of them via email, and that is I think that's the best way. I get some over LinkedIn, and it's just that's not really what I'm using LinkedIn for. So I'd rather see them in my email. When I receive them, I ask myself, is this new? Is this a reliable source that I recognize? Does it apply to my audience? Is it an exclusive? It doesn't have to be an exclusive, but that's a plus. Um, and is it a recognizable name? It doesn't have to be, but the auto industry is so big that there are some names we just don't know. So even if you can just give us a little bit more information about the company, what they do exactly, or who they work with, like the big names that we recognize that they work with. I know sometimes you can't disclose, but you could even say works with three of the top automakers or something like that to just give us an idea of the expertise focus area and really like the scope of their business.
Right. And do you have any specific format when it comes to press releases, like length or multimedia or anything like that?
Not really. I mean, I will say that I get so many emails, I don't read like every email top to bottom. So it's probably best to put like the key bullet points right at the top. So I can read those quickly, instead of, a narrative that I have to read through and may not be able to read through. I think it's good to put those bullets right at the top.
Right. And when someone pitches you a press release, would you want them to kind of follow up with you? How many times? Is one follow-up is enough? Or, how many days should they give until they follow up?
So yeah, I don't mind a follow-up because sometimes I miss an email or I'll be looking at it and then I get pulled into something else and it disappears. So yeah, I think one or two follow-ups is good as long as you're sure that it does apply to me and applies to my beat. Follow-ups for stories that do not apply to my beat, I don't really want those ones. And I'll try to reply and say, no, we're not interested, when I can. But for example, I got a pitch from a charging company the other day, and I have been covering tariffs all week, so I just didn't have a chance to respond to them. And they were asking about an interview for next week, and I just wasn't sure of my schedule yet. So I meant to respond, but just it slipped my mind, and they followed up, and I appreciated that. So that is a good time to follow up.
Yeah, that's great to know. And so what do you see the role of press releases nowadays? Do you think they're as important as they were before, or what should authors think about when they're writing a press release?
Yeah, I think they're still important.
Mhm.
Definitely. It's a good way to get the word out. I think it's still, it is important to make sure that the biggest news out of the press release is highlighted very prominently.
Mhm.
And that, like um, other relevant details are in there, even if it's not part of the news, like context, is in there. But yeah, I think press releases still do their job, and it's a good way to get the word to a lot of people at once.
Yeah, I agree. How would you like to be pitched mostly? The email, I know some reporters, don't mind getting pitched on social media like Twitter or LinkedIn. Do you have any preference there?
I think email is best.
Hmm.
If someone's emailing me and I don't respond and it's like a topic that is relevant to my beat, I don't mind like a follow-up on LinkedIn because sometimes I miss an email or sometimes it goes into like my junk mail. So I don't mind a follow-up on LinkedIn, but I think that email is still the best way.
And also, what is the best time and day, for someone to pitch you?
I don't know. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter really.
doesn't matter,
Not on the weekend, but
right?
yeah. I mean, I guess in the morning, and that's when I'm usually like scanning through all my emails.
Mhm. And it doesn't matter what day. Like I know when I was in PR, Monday was usually avoided because it's just the first day of the week and everybody has so much in their inboxes. So like your pitch will get lost probably in the inbox. So do you agree with that? Is Monday not a good way to pitch someone, or it really depends on the reporter, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, to be honest, every day is
Every-
busy. The industry's moving so fast that it
Yeah,
doesn't really matter. I mean, I'll scan my inbox every day.
awesome. And you've said that you've been covering tariffs this week. What is the biggest story, the most memorable story that you've covered in your career in automotive industry?
Well, this isn't necessarily one story, but the whole transition to electric vehicles has been a story that I've followed for the past few years. Um, And it is a big shift from internal combustion engines, not only just the cars themselves, but how you how you live with them. You're not going to a gas station anymore. You're charging your car. And for most people, they'll be able to do that at home. But when they're not at home, they have to figure out how they can do that on the road. So stories about public charging infrastructure have been really interesting to me. And then also like the economics of owning an EV. The price tag up front is has been higher than internal combustion vehicles, but over time, owners can save just because of electricity savings. But it's so dynamic; it changes all the time because gas prices change and electricity prices change. So, kind of unpacking that whole story has been really fun for me.
Do you have any advice or any, any tips that you want to share with journalists and comp pros? Let's start with journalists. If you have any tips or advice you want to share with journalists in the automotive industry.
Journalists. Well, I feel like the first thing I'll say, speaking about automotive news, I am really proud to be on this team. I think that everyone has done a great job in, all the things that we have to do for, various events and topics that we cover, while also being really on top of the news of the day and the topic of the moment, which is tariffs right now. We have a really smart team, so I'm very lucky to be on it. So I don't really have any tips for them besides like pacing themselves and you know, trying to make sure like we have a balance, which I think we do. We're not all working all night long or anything. So that's a good priority. For communications professionals,
Any, advice for them that are, they're trying
mhm.
to place stories or, get their pitches or press releases picked up?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would say to try to like think like a journalist, like think about what is the news of the moment, what would be helpful, what are they going to be looking for in their story? Maybe it's a really interesting data point. So follow what's happening. You could sometimes people ask me what I'll be writing about soon. And sometimes, when like I wouldn't have the details on what I'll be writing about tariffs like 2 weeks before they happen, but if I'm following something in the EV space, I'm happy to share what I'm following, and then they can pitch me on one of their clients who has something related. So I think keeping the conversation with journalists open is helpful, and you know, thinking like a journalist in terms of the breaking news and what would be um, good perspective to add to it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's some great advice there. I really appreciate your time again. Thank you so much, Hannah, for joining us and for sharing your insights. This has been a very valuable conversation. At least for me, I learned a lot from you just from our talk. And yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure having you on Media Coffee, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you, Sammy.
And that wraps up this episode of Media Coffee. Thanks again to Hannah Lutz for joining us, and congrats once more on her recent promotion. Here are a few takeaways from our conversation. Number one, think like a journalist. The auto industry is rapidly changing, so staying informed is essential to crafting a strong and relevant pitch. Even if you don't have a hard news story, reporters value introductions to subject matter experts so that they can keep in mind for future coverage. Do not hesitate to follow up. A respectful reminder can go a long way, especially when the pitch fits the beat. And lastly, reporters still see press releases as a valuable tool for building credibility and reaching a wider audience. One thing that really resonated with me when that Hannah pointed out in our interview was making sure that the expert you pitch is actually available to comment. I remember a time early in my PR career when I pitched a reporter who was genuinely interested in my story, but the spokesperson I had proposed wasn't ready. It didn't serve either side well, and it was a mistake I will never make again. So I'm glad that Hannah called it out because it matters. Thanks again for watching, and if you found this episode helpful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you next time on Media Coffee.